a bus with 40 passengers, an empty road in the middle of the night, and a woman in a blue dress standing where no one should have been. What happened in the next 5 seconds saved 40 lives and changed a man forever. A miracle of the Virgin Mary that nobody can explain. But before we continue, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'd love to see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary are reaching. You know, that kind of person who believed in everything, Mass every Sunday, rosary on the bedside table? Robert Mitchell was exactly that. 48 years old, an interstate bus driver for more than 15 years, married to Jennifer for 20 wonderful years, father of 2 children, Emma and Jake. A good, stable life built on a solid foundation of faith that seemed unshakable. Until one night, returning from a long trip, exhausted but happy, thinking about finally getting home, the phone rang. It was the hospital, and the voice on the other end carried that tone you never forget, that tone that changes everything forever. Jennifer had been in an accident. A car had run through a red light at high speed and hit the driver's side. She was alone, coming back from the supermarket with the week's groceries, probably humming a song on the radio like she always did. When Robert reached the hospital running, his heart beating so hard it hurt, with Emma and Jake behind him just as desperate, the doctors already had that expression on their faces. The expression that says everything without needing words. It was already too late. Jennifer was gone, and with her, without Robert realizing it, in that moment of sharp, unbearable pain, his faith also began to die. At the funeral 3 days later, Robert sat in the front row of the church he had attended his whole life. The same church where he had married Jennifer, where his children had been baptized, where every week he came to give thanks for the blessings he received. But now, looking at the dark wooden casket with the crucifix on top, something inside him broke in a way he didn't know was possible. It wasn't sadness. Sadness he felt, of course, a pain so deep that every breath hurt. But there was something else, something dark and corrosive. Anger, pure incandescent anger directed straight upward toward the sky, toward the God he had faithfully served his entire life. "Where were you?" Robert asked in silence, staring at the ceiling of the church as if he could see through it into heaven. 20 years praying every day, 20 years doing everything right, being a good man, a good husband, a good father. And this is how you repaid me? This is how you rewarded my devotion? The questions echoed in his mind, without an answer. In the months that followed, Robert changed in ways that scared his children. The warm, loving man they knew was replaced by someone cold and distant. He took the statue of the Virgin Mary out of the living room, the statue that had been there for 15 years, that Jennifer had personally chosen and placed with such care. He stored it in a box in the attic along with other things he couldn't look at without the pain exploding inside him again. The rosary he used every night. Before sleeping, running the beads between his fingers while praying for those he loved. It went into the nightstand drawer and was never touched again. The children eventually gave up, not because they lacked love or stopped caring, but because they no longer knew what to do, how to reach a man who had shut himself off so completely from the world. And Robert continued driving his usual route. Chicago to Denver. 20 hours crossing the country through endless straight lines and curves he knew by heart. But now he drove differently, on autopilot. Before he greeted passengers as they boarded, chatted during stops, made jokes to ease the boredom of the long trip. Now he simply did his job mechanically, checked the bus, drove to the destination, and went back home to sit alone in the darkness. 5 years passed exactly like this. 5 years of merely existing without truly living. It was Friday night when Robert arrived at the terminal for another overnight trip, the graveyard shift that paid a little better but most drivers avoided. 40 passengers waited in the boarding area under the cold fluorescent lights, families returning home after visiting relatives, tired but content faces, college students going home for the weekend. all with their own lives, their own purposes. Robert checked the bus. Everything in order, everything exactly as it should be. He opened the doors, and the passengers began to board one by one. Robert didn't even look at their faces. When everyone was settled, he closed the door and put the bus in motion. Another trip, another night. The first hours of the trip were exactly as they always were. The empty road stretched ahead under a dark, moonless sky. Only the bus headlights cutting through the darkness. Passengers slept deeply in their seats, heads gently swaying with the movement of the vehicle, some snoring softly. 2 hours passed in a blur of darkness and white lines. 3 in the morning, that hour of the night when the whole world seems to be asleep, when you feel like you are the only person awake on the planet. Robert looked through the rearview mirror, 40 people trusting him to take them safely to their destination. He turned his eyes back to the road and continued driving through the endless night. Up ahead, he began to take a curve. That was when he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. A woman. Standing in the middle of the road. Right ahead, illuminated by the bus headlights. Robert blinked hard, thinking he must be seeing things, that the non-stop hours of driving were beginning to affect his perception. But when he opened his eyes again, the woman was still there, solid and real and impossible. She was a woman dressed in a blue cloak that seemed to shine even more under the headlights, as if the fabric captured and reflected the light in a way normal cloth shouldn't. She was standing completely still at the precise center of the road, not trying to move out of the way, not signaling for help, just standing there as if she were waiting for him specifically. And the most disturbing thing of all, she was looking directly at him through the windshield, her eyes fixed on his face even from the distance that still separated them. Robert's heart raced. There was no time to think, to rationalize, to question what he was seeing. There was only time to react, and his body reacted before his mind could fully process what was happening. Robert jerked the steering wheel sharply with all the strength in his arms. The bus responded immediately, a multi-ton vehicle shifting direction rapidly at 80 kilometers per hour. The tires screeched against the asphalt in a high-pitched cry that pierced the silence of the night, leaving black marks of burnt rubber on the road that would remain there for weeks. The bus veered completely off its normal path, swerving away from the woman in the blue cloak who remained standing, still motionless, still staring at him. Passengers woke up instantly, torn from their dreams by pure terror. Screams erupted all over the bus. Luggage fell from the overhead compartments, and some passengers cried in absolute panic. "What's happening?" Someone screamed in a shrill voice filled with pure fear. My God, another passenger repeated over and over like a mantra. Robert wrestled with the steering wheel with every ounce of strength he had. That's when he saw through the right side window what was there, waiting like an open mouth, ready to swallow them whole. A cliff. A steep drop that disappeared into total darkness, probably 50 meters down to a rocky bottom he couldn't see but knew was there. And the bus was heading straight for that edge, sliding on asphalt that felt impossible to stop. "No, no, no!" Robert shouted. And then came the impact, the sound of metal being completely destroyed, twisting and tearing in ways metal should not be able to. The sound of hundreds of kilos of glass exploding into millions of tiny shards that flew through the inside of the bus like hail. The bus crashed into something solid and unmoving with a force that made the entire vehicle tremble and shake. The front side was completely crushed, and then, after seconds that seemed to last entire hours, the bus finally came to a stop. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Only heavy, dense silence, the kind that comes immediately after a disaster, when the human brain is still trying to process what just happened. And then the silence shattered explosively. "Are we alive?" someone shouted, a mixture of disbelief and relief in their voice. "What happened?" another asked, their voice trembling. Robert was completely paralyzed in the driver's seat, his hand still gripping the steering wheel with a force that made his fingers ache, his knuckles white from holding on so tightly. His entire body was trembling with adrenaline and shock. He looked around through the windshield, which was completely shattered in a spider web pattern, turning the outside world into a fragmented and distorted version of reality. Passengers were alive. He could see them, frightened, in shock, some clearly injured, but alive. All alive. Robert stepped out of the bus. Other passengers were already getting out as well. People helping each other, young people helping the elderly down. Everyone was confused, in shock, not fully understanding what had happened or why they were alive when they felt they shouldn't be. Robert walked a few unsteady steps around the bus, seeing for the first time the true extent of the damage. The front side was completely destroyed. That was when Robert finally saw what they had hit. Through the fog that had formed, he saw a truck. Big, heavy. The kind of cargo truck that carried tons of goods across the country. It was stopped there in the middle of the road, positioned at a strange angle, its hazard lights blinking weakly through the fog. The truck was just there, immense, solid, and unmoving, like a mountain of metal. The fog was so dense now that Robert could barely see more than a few meters ahead. The truck was completely invisible through that fog until you were practically on top of it, and Robert understood with terrible sudden clarity what would have happened if he hadn't swerved, if he had kept the normal trajectory of the curve, driving at normal speed, with no warning that there was a huge, immobile obstacle waiting for him, hidden by the fog. He would have hit that truck head on. The laws of physics are unforgiving and make no exceptions. It would have been fatal. A man stepped out of the truck's cab, and Robert saw he was around 60 years old, gray-haired, his face pale with fright. He ran toward Robert with that clumsy, stumbling run, and when he got close, his words came out in a rushed and almost incoherent torrent. "Are you all okay? My God, are you all okay? I stopped." The truck's engine started making a strange noise, and then it just died, but this fog, this damn fog, appeared out of nowhere, and it's so thick you can't see anything more than 2 meters ahead, and then... He stopped, breathing heavily, eyes wide with terror as he realized how close everyone had come to a much worse disaster. Robert looked at the truck driver, but his words barely registered in his mind, which was still processing everything. He turned slowly, looking back toward the curve they had come from, the curve where he had seen the woman in a blue mantle. A bus full of passengers. "My God," Robert whispered. A passenger approached. He was a man of maybe 50, wearing glasses that were crooked on his face, probably from the impact. "How did you see it?" he asked with a trembling voice. "The fog is so thick I can barely see 3 meters ahead. How did you see the truck in time to swerve?" Robert turned to him, and for a moment he just stared, not knowing what to say. How could he explain? How could he put into words something he himself could barely believe? I saw," he began, and his voice came out hoarse and broken. "Saw what?" the man pressed, and other passengers were approaching now as well, all wanting to understand how they had survived. "A woman," Robert finally said, and the words came out almost like a confession. "I saw a woman in a blue mantle, standing in the middle of the road." The man frowned, confusion clear on his face, and looked toward the curve they had come from. He looked back at Robert. "There was no one there," he said with absolute certainty. "I was awake. I was looking out the window. I didn't see any woman." Other passengers murmured in agreement. An elderly lady who was close enough to hear the conversation said, "I was awake too. I was looking out the window when you swerved so suddenly. I didn't see anything on the road, no woman." Robert looked around at all the faces staring at him with a mixture of curiosity, concern, and confusion. He looked back at the curve. "But I saw her," he insisted, hearing the desperation in his own voice. "She was standing right in the middle of the curve. A blue mantle. She was there. I swear, she was there." but the faces around him remained skeptical and worried. Sirens began sounding in the distance, growing gradually louder. Ambulances arrived with red and blue lights flashing through the fog in an almost surreal way. Paramedics rushed out, checking each person methodically. A paramedic checked Robert quickly. "You were lucky. If you had hit head-on—" He didn't finish the sentence. Robert looked at the truck, at the passengers being treated, at the fog that still hid everything, the woman in the blue mantle that only he had seen, the swerve at the exact moment. His legs gave out. Robert collapsed to his knees on the shoulder of the road, and for the first time in 5 years, he cried. "Virgin Mary," the words came out broken, "Jennifer always prayed to you." And I stopped believing. Tears were falling. But today, you came. You saved all of them. You showed me that I was never alone. His hands came together in prayer. Forgiveness for everything, for these years of anger, for closing my heart. He took a deep breath. And thank you for saving all of them, for saving me even when I thought I didn't deserve it. He remained there on his knees while chaos continued around him. Ambulances taking away injured passengers, a tow truck arriving to remove the vehicles. But Robert barely registered any of it. He was somewhere else, a place within himself where something fundamental was changing. In the days that followed, Robert couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The bus company put him on paid leave. He stayed home, which was good because he couldn't sleep properly anyway. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman in the blue mantle standing on the road, looking directly at him. Emma visited him on Tuesday, bringing food she knew he wasn't preparing for himself. She sat with him in the kitchen while he only pushed the food around on the plate. "Dad, what happened that night?" Robert looked at his daughter and saw Jennifer in her, the same curve of the nose, the same gentle eyes. "I saw something I shouldn't have seen, and it saved all of us." Emma waited, knowing there was more. "I saw the Virgin Mary, Emma, in the middle of the road, blue mantle, looking straight at me. And when I swerved to avoid her, I missed the truck that was invisible in the fog and would have been fatal." Emma remained silent for a long moment. "Do you believe that? Do you really believe it?" Robert nodded slowly. 5 years I spent angry, thinking God had abandoned me when your mother left us. But he never abandoned me, Emma. I'm the one who walked away. And even then, when I needed it, when 40 people needed it, she came. He saw tears in his daughter's eyes. "Mom always said the Virgin Mary watched over us." That night, Robert went to his bedside table. He opened the drawer where he kept the rosary. The blue beads shone under the dim light of the lamp, blue like the dress she was wearing. He picked up the rosary, felt its weight in his hand, and for the first time in years, prayed a full Hail Mary. 2 weeks after the accident, Robert went back to driving. But he was different now. He greeted each passenger who boarded, making light jokes. During long stops, he chatted with people, listening to their stories, sharing small pieces of his own. He drove with the same skill as always, but now there was purpose behind every kilometer, gratitude for every trip completed safely. And every time he reached that specific curve on the route, the curve where everything changed, Robert touched the rosary in his pocket. He looked toward the place where she had stood, where no one else had managed to see her, but he knew with absolute certainty that she had been there. On Sunday morning, Robert woke early, made coffee, and dressed carefully. Emma and Jake arrived together just before 9, clear surprise on their faces when they saw their father ready and waiting. "We're going to be late for Mass," Robert said with a small smile, the first genuine smile his children had seen in years. Today, if you ask Robert about that night, he will tell you the full story without hesitation. He doesn't care whether people believe him or think it was a hallucination caused by exhaustion. He knows what he saw. He knows whom he saw, and that is enough. 40 lives spared by a split second of intervention from the Virgin Mary that only one man was able to see. But perhaps the real miracle wasn't just saving those 40 people. Perhaps it was saving Robert himself, reminding him that faith doesn't die when we stop believing. It simply waits patiently until we are ready to return. Before we finish, I want to invite you to join our prayer community for the Virgin Mary, a space of faith and hope where people from all over the world come together to pray and share the graces they have received. If you feel in your heart the desire to be part of this chain of prayer, click below and become a member of the channel today, and come pray with us. And if you made it this far, to the end of Robert's story, do one thing for me. Write rosary in the comments, those blue beads that remained forgotten in the drawer for 5 years, until the night a man finally understood that he had never been alone. I want to see how many hearts this story truly reached. And every time I read rosary in the comments, I will know that one more person believes that miracles of the Virgin Mary still happen. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to renew their hope today. May the Virgin Mary continue blessing and protecting you and your family. Amen.